Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. So, I ended up watching this movie a bit sooner than I expected because it's part of the list of DVDs I've been rewatching with my dad. And we have like three of the Wes Anderson movies on there, including this one, because our three favorites, or at least my three favorites, I made sure that we have on DVD. And then there was also the movie It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, and that was the one I was going to pick next because I wanted to like watch that and then just kind of binge like a bunch of Wes Anderson stuff, because it's kind of nice with those to sort of just, even if you're not watching them in chronological order, I feel like I get more into the mood for them if I'm watching like just those, really. But we were trying to find like what was the shortest, because we had like a limited amount of time. Apparently the shortest between Moonrise Kingdom, Royal Tenenbaums, and Grand Budapest Hotel was Moonrise Kingdom. But that's okay. That one's actually my first Wes Anderson movie. Also was my favorite. Well, I don't know why I'm saying was. I still need to watch the other. Well, I've seen all of them, but it's like been a while. This one, I feel like my feelings changed towards it on this viewing, though. This is probably like the third time I've seen it, maybe. It's kind of funny. Originally, I still kind of remember it. Like, my dad was watching something on TV, and I happened to go downstairs, and it was this movie, and I didn't know who Wes Anderson was or anything, or what his, like, style looks like. He has, like, a very specific style. And I just remember seeing, it was one of the scenes towards the end, actually, of the characters, some of them dressed up in these like animal costumes and stuff, and I was like, what the heck is this? And then I just sat down and I like kept watching it, and I hadn't seen it from the beginning or anything, but I still got into it. Part of the reason I like this one and why it kind of feels different to me than some of the other Wes Anderson movies is the main characters being kids rather than adults, because I think in all the other ones they're adults. I mean, they're not like happy kids or anything. I feel like all of Wes Anderson's protagonists, from what I can remember, are usually like very troubled people, and these kids are no exception. But I feel like because the main characters are kids, this one just feels a little bit like lighter to me. I don't know if it makes sense and stuff. So I'll describe the plot with this one. It takes place in 1965 on this island. I don't actually know if the island, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, if it's like a real place or not, like a real place with that name and everything, or if it's like, I mean, obviously it has to be real, as it, this movie has to be shot somewhere in the world, obviously, but if it's like a made-up name for it that Wes Anderson gave or whatever, because he gets like if you've seen his movie, he gets like very specific on like little details of things. Like there's a narrator character in this that will mention of like the temperature of the water and stuff, and what on all these little details, and telling you all these facts about the island. Like it's very, very specific, so I wonder if those are true or not. And this isn't the only movie like that. What is it? The one with Bill Murray where it's like I can't say that. Wait, Bill Murray's in a ton of these. I was going to say the one where Bill Murray is one of the like main characters, where he has like the red hat. He's kind of dressed like a Smurf a little bit. Where it's like a fake documentary, and they go in this big yellow submarine. It's like the water one. I just can't remember what it's called. I think it's from like 2004, somewhere around there. I mean, that's the thing with the Wes Anderson movies, is you can't say like, oh, it's the one with like Bill Murray or whatever, because he has like at least 10 people that are in like almost all of these. Recently it kind of changed up a little bit, but like Bill Murray is in like a ton of these, but it's one of the ones where he's like the protagonist of it. I think his character's name's Steve. That one I think I also have to rewatch, because I know the movies are on like various streaming services and such. Anyway, yeah, this takes place in 1965, and the protagonists are these two 12-year-old kids. One of them is named Sam, who's an orphan, and also I think they're called like khaki scouts or something. They're like Boy Scouts, basically. I'll just refer to them as scouts. And his friends, and her name is Susie, and she lives with her parents and her three brothers, but she's kind of treated as like a sort of a misfit, troubled child. Her parents don't really know what to do with her. She keeps getting into fights with people and stuff. She kind of has a tendency for violence, and Sam is also someone that's a bit of an outcast, and that the other orphans and stuff don't like him, and he ends up joining scouts, and the scouts don't like him either. Like, he's like a friendly guy, he's a good kid, he just people just don't seem to get along with him or anything. And he's trying to make friends, and they end up having this like chance meeting at like a school play type thing, and then they become pen pals, and by the time the plot of the movie starts, they've decided to run away together. They like have to meet up in the wilderness in like this field. It's one of my favorite like Wes Anderson scenes. Happens like a little bit into the movie where they meet up in this like golden field, and it's only the second time I believe they've seen each other in person, and but they've been like pen pals for a while, and yeah, they decide to run away together. It's not like they can get super duper far, this all is contained on the island. They don't like ever leave the island. They try to, but they don't get off it or anything, or it's like, I think there's like 2 islands actually. They do end up on like the second one later. It's mostly through like canoeing and things. So one of the reasons I like this movie, before I continue, is I feel like some of the newer Wes Anderson movies, like The French Dispatch or Asteroid City, I feel like there's just too many characters, and with some of them, like The French Dispatch, it's like there's multiple storylines going on, and I feel like it's just a lot that you have to focus on, where they kind of just make more sense after the first couple watches and stuff. And part of the reason I like Moonrise Kingdom, and I'm not trying to specifically single this one out, it's just like this is the most recent one I've watched right now, so it's like very clear in my head at the moment. Sort of, I watched this like a couple hours ago. It's just one storyline. It's very simple, of like these kids end up running away, and the adults, which are actually just all the names that are listed on here, which is kind of fun. I think the kids, like the actual actors' names for the children, aren't even on here. For the main 2 kids, there's like a whole like scout group, which are also kids, as you can see in here. But the 2 leads' names aren't even on here. It just has like all the adults, because all the adults are played by the usual Wes Anderson actors, which I'll talk about. And then it's like the adults, like Susie's parents and the police officer of the island and the scoutmaster and stuff are trying to find the kids, and that's like pretty much the simplest way to describe it. They don't really give a reason of why it's called like Moonrise Kingdom, or if that's like a place they're trying to go to or anything. At the end there's a painting, it's like the last shot of the movie, and it's this location that existed in the movie and then disappeared throughout the plot, and there's like these rocks that spell out the word Moonrise Kingdom. I feel like maybe it has to do with that location. I don't know. That's like the one time the title's kind of referenced in the story, but I do like the name. It sounds like kind of whimsical and stuff. It's kind of like the main characters, the kids, are like making their own place for themselves, But yeah, they end up running away twice, but the first time is kind of like their main adventure, really. I don't know if I'll go over like the whole plot. I don't have notes for this since I watched this with my dad, but I'll just talk about the things I liked and some of the characters and stuff. Like I mentioned, the meeting between Susie and Sam in that field, I really liked that, just the way it's shot and everything. But I think it's just a good scene where at that point you don't know how they know each other or what's happening or anything, and then there's like a 1 year ago flashback or something that explains it. I like the animal costumes, because in that flashback it's like Susie is putting on this play with a bunch of other people, with a bunch of other kids, and she's dressed as like a raven or a crow or whatever, and Sam asks her about it and stuff. I thought the costumes were kind of cute. It made me think of Fantastic Mr. Fox, because they're all like different animals. That's another one I need to rewatch, actually. I was trying to tell my dad about it earlier. Susie, I like her as a character. I feel like she's like much more complicated than Sam. I mean, Sam has his own issues and stuff. He's an orphan. When he ends up running away, It turns out his foster family actually just doesn't want him anymore. They view him as too much trouble. He does end up getting adopted at the end, which is really nice. The island police officer, who's the character played by Bruce Willis, he ends up adopting Sam. He's kind of a cool character. It's really just him and Edward Norton's like Scoutmaster character. I feel like we're the only ones that were really trying to look for the kids. But the police officer character, he ends up getting along with Sam towards the end when Sam's like forced to live with him and stuff for a bit, and then ends up adopting him and taking him to like see Susie and stuff. He kind of has his own stuff going on. He's like having an affair with Susie's mom. Well, he's not like married or anything, but she is. He's like, he keeps seeing Susie's mom. They break it up at the end. He's described by other characters. I think Susie describes him as like a sad police officer or something. He lives in like this RV, and I like how one of his conversations with Sam is about him saying of like, oh, you're smart, you're probably smarter than me, I know that as a fact. And his thing, you can see how over the movie he grows to really like Sam, because there's a social services lady who's played by Tilda Swinton. She's literally just named like social services in the credits and refers to herself as such, as if it was like her own name. I find that funny. She's like a very no-nonsense person who's dressed in like all blue. She's only towards like the end of the story, but she gets into some fights, verbal, with the police officer character of like trying to figure out what's best for Sam. Because early on it's mentioned Sam will go to like an orphanage or something, and the police officer, is trying to not let that happen. He spends the whole movie like trying to find Sam and stuff, and is like really concerned about him. So it's nice that Sam at least has someone looking out for him. I'll just talk about the characters. That's gonna make this like easier. The Scoutmaster character, it was kind of funny. I remember when I watched this movie for like the first or second time, which is also with my dad, I remember him saying something of like, this is the only time I've seen Edward Norton play like a nice guy, like a decent person. And I've thought about that ever since when I've seen Edward Norton in other movies. Not like I've seen every movie he's ever made, but I feel like my dad's partially right. This is like one of the only roles I can think of off the top of my head where he plays like a nice guy. It's like I mentioned, he's one of the only other characters that is like trying to really find the kids through the whole movie. He's like put through hell to this movie, honestly, where at first it's like Sam runs away, and him and the other, or the Scoutmaster and the other scouts are trying to find him. They fail to find him for a while. Actually, the scouts, the kids end up finding Sam before the Scoutmaster does. And then one of the scouts gets injured, and then the kids end up running away again. And I remember this part where you see the Scoutmaster, and he's on like a little motorboat, and it's already like raining because there's like a storm coming, and he's out there trying to find the kids and everything. He gets chewed out by the social service lady of like, because eventually he ends up just losing the entire scout group. Well, not really losing, it's more like they end up escaping, and he wakes up the next morning and they're all gone. He's like, oh shit, where are the kids? And he gets chewed out by the social services lady. He gets chewed out by this like older Scoutmaster guy, of like, how the hell did you lose your own troop? You're not fit to be a scout leader or whatever. But then he does redeem himself almost immediately, where the older Scoutmaster guy, and I'm like bouncing around between parts of the movie, by the way, he ends up going into this little building to get his medicine, and then a flood comes, and then the building catches on fire, and there's like fireworks in there, and the scout leader goes inside to save the older guy, and immediately like takes charge and stuff. Because that's the thing, the characters view him as incompetent and almost kind of stupid, of like, how did you lose these kids or whatever. But here's the two things. One, he is a very like competent and smart person. He can be no nonsense when he needs to. Like at the beginning of the movie, you see like a whole little part where he's going around and checking how the scouts are doing, and they're allowed to do all kinds of stuff like ride motorcycles or build tree houses and whatever, but he's very strict on it, of like taking away their privileges if necessary and making sure they're doing things like the safe and correct way, or even stuff about like having their uniforms be neat or whatever. But you can also be really nice about things too, of like I like the scene when he finds out that Sam's an orphan, he goes to have like a one-on-one about it and stuff, and he's just as focused on finding Sam and Susie as the police officer guy is. What was the other thing I was going to say about him? Oh, the other thing of like why the other characters shouldn't get mad, where it sounds, if you heard the thing of like, oh, this person lost all the children they were supposed to look after, you'd think it was their fault. But these kids are really freaking clever and really good at like retaining their like scout knowledge and stuff, especially Sam's kind of the one that stands out in a lot of those skills, but so is the rest of the group, where they like, to make sure it looks like they haven't actually left the camp or anything, they zip up their tents from the inside, and they cut holes on like the side of the tent. There's one part where they sneak into a chimney. They're able to get into people's houses and sneak people out without making a sound. They do that for Sam and Susie a couple times. They even built this freaking tree house that was at the top of this tree, like ridiculously tall, and it was actually like structural and stuff, where they were able to sit inside and whatever, and they accomplished that in like a very short amount of time. Or just a bunch of the other things they do. But that's also the thing with these kids that's kind of weird to watch them, where it's a Wes Anderson movie where like everyone has like a very specific like no nonsense way of talking, where the kids all talk like they are kids, where they don't think of like everything going on, or if like, is this the smartest thing I should be doing in this situation, or will this worry the adults or whatever. But at the same time, they have a way of talking where they talk like how adults do. I don't know how better to describe that, but that's how like everyone in the Wes Anderson world, like in these movies, like talks and stuff. So they kind of almost feel like mini adults, but they're also like very competent. Like Sam, especially when he's running around with Susie, of like covering their tracks and just all of these skills he knows how to do. These kids will go and like canoe down rivers and stuff by themselves and just go all over the freaking place in this island. It's like a pretty big area too. So that's kind of impressive in itself. And all the kid actors, by the way, they do a great job acting in this movie. I especially liked with Sam, where he can sometimes be very like competent about things with his scout stuff and trying to guide Susie, but also can be kind of a bit socially awkward and whatever. Him and Susie especially are like very impulsive about things, but especially like their feelings and each other. And the scouts are also good actors and stuff. There's like a leader of theirs that especially I think knocks it out of the park. What else? Susie's parents, her dad is played by Bill Murray, and then Frances McDormand plays the mom. They're kind of interesting characters as well, because besides the whole plot of them trying to find their daughter, they're also going through their own issues of the mom character is cheating on her husband, seeing this police officer and stuff. And I wasn't completely sure if the dad knew or kind of felt like something was off. There's like this one time where they have a conversation when they're in bed and they're sort of talking about it and stuff, and the mom, neither of the parents seem like they're happy with their lives, but it sounds like they want to stay together as a couple just because they know that their kids need them and stuff. They have a conversation about it. Actually, I'll talk about the dad first. The dad is kind of like distant. Neither of the parents seem very affectionate with their kids. They have 4 kids, by the way. Susie's their oldest, who's 12. And there's like 3 little boys that I'm not sure if they're like triplets or something. They look kind of similar. The boys, only one of them is actually somewhat plot important. I swear the other 2 don't have lines. And the one that is plot important is just because he's a bit of a tattletale and Susie keeps taking his record player without asking or whatever. And that's what ends up alerting the parents of like, hey, our kid went missing or whatever. But I swear the other 2 boys don't have lines or anything or are important. They're just kind of there. But the 3 of them are always together. So yeah, they exist. The dad, yeah, both parents are like distant from their family, but especially like the dad, like he does care about Susie and everything and trying to find her. He seems to have some like anger issues as well. He almost gets into a fight, I think, with either the policeman or the scoutmaster towards the beginning. And then there's a part when the first time they finally find Susie and Sam, he gets really pissed. It's almost kind of funny actually, where Susie and Sam, I won't talk about it just yet. They're like in this, of giving all the details, but they're in this tent and they're like clinging to each other, and the dad actually just lifts up, he's like charging towards them and then just lifts up the tent because it doesn't weigh anything, and then tells Sam in like a very serious way of like, hey, you 2 are never going to talk to each other again and whatever. There's a part where he just decides to go out with some beer and an axe to go like chop down a tree, you know, to kind of deal with his emotions or whatever. But I think on some level he maybe knows that his wife is like cheating on him and stuff. The mom, the wife, yeah, like I mentioned, she has the thing with the policeman. There's this one conversation with Susie she has that I find really interesting, where it's after Susie's come home the first time and the mom's trying to be sort of nice to her, being like, hey, I somewhat know what you're going through, and Susie's in like a bathtub, the mom's like bathing her or whatever, and she starts saying this stuff about, it's like somewhat vague but I think applies to her situation, of like not being happy with the way life is, and it sounds like she kind of just regrets where she is with her life, like it didn't turn out the way she wanted, but also I think it sounds like she regrets her marriage, but at the same time she cares about her children and like wants to stay with her husband, you know, because they need both their parents and stuff, but it does sound like she has some regrets. And then at the end she tells the policeman like, hey, we need to just stop seeing each other, you know, I have to like go to my family and stuff, and we just can't do this anymore. So she's the one to break it off, which I think takes guts, honestly. So I felt sorry for her, especially as a character. I also find it kind of funny though, she whenever she calls down her kids for dinner, she always uses a bullhorn. I thought that was kind of funny. But she's also like a very loud, both of Susie's parents are like very loud and stuff, can be like a little irritating and whatever, and sometimes a bit unreasonable. I can understand, because there's like a little montage of Susie and Sam's letters, because they start off as pen pals, like I mentioned, and you see several scenes where Susie's like getting into fights with her parents and stuff. Oh yeah, the man on the left is kind of interesting. All the way on the left of this poster, he's in the red jacket, so he's the one that like stands out the most, because most of the characters were very like soft colors in this. Like blue and yellow were like the main colors, but like Susie's always wearing pink, the khaki scouts are always wearing like tan or whatever. But the narrator guy, that's the one on the left, he wears that green hat and that red jacket the whole movie, and it's like the brightest shade of red out of anyone's like clothing and such. He's interesting, where he's one of those narrators that's like, he's the narrator, he's able to kind of like warp around the map and tell us information and stuff. That's kind of how he's a narrator, rather than like narrating what's happening throughout the story. He's just like the exposition guy, but he also exists as a character within the story, which I always find that kind of interesting when there's like a narrator that, you know, they know things and they exist out of the story, but they're also character in the world that the other ones can interact with and stuff. Like they're not safe from the stuff happening in the story. It makes me think of like Into the Woods as an example. But he perks up at one point to mention about how he knows where Sam's going and taught Sam stuff about like map making or whatever. So he's a character that's in their world, not like a super important character in the story, but I thought I'd just bring that up. At this point I'm just kind of going over characters in the story. Jason Schwartzman has a small role in this. He's also one of the actors that's in a lot of the Wes Anderson movies. I think especially a lot of the early ones. Like I think his first one was Rushmore, where he was playing like a 17-year-old or something, but here he's an adult. His character is named Cousin Ben. He's in like a couple of scenes towards the end where the second time Susie and Sam run away, they're accompanied by the scouts and they decide to get married, and Cousin Ben is the one that like officiates their wedding. I actually really liked that scene because he's explaining to them of like, this isn't a legal marriage that will hold up in any court of law or church or whatever, but this is an important thing. This is the most important decision of your lives, and you'll know within yourselves that you're being married. So he makes them take it very seriously, because at first they're just saying yes immediately. They're giving him very quick answers, and he knows that, and he's like, okay, you're not listening. And he tells them like, go over by this trampoline and talk about it. And they talk about it. You can't hear what they're saying, but you're just watching this kid that's on the trampoline nearby bouncing or whatever. That was kind of funny, and the kid does some like flips on there too, so there's always something going on screen in these movies that I really like. But they decide to get married. They do it for $75. They give him like a can of coins or whatever, and then that's it. They're like married. And I like the part when they walk away from the marriage and Susie and Sam are holding hands, and it's like in slow motion or something. That was pretty cool. And it's kind of funny because Sam runs into like the leader of the scouts, not of like the kids, out of the kids, not the scoutmaster. And this kid's kind of pissed at Sam because Susie had injured him earlier in the movie. She stabs him with scissors and ends up giving him like kidney damage. And Sam's trying to ask him like, why don't you like me? Why have you never liked me? And I almost shouted at the screen, not everyone needs to like you, Sam. Because that's true. Not everyone likes you in life, and that's okay. That's sometimes just how it is. But Sam's like demanding an answer from this kid. Not like he's getting upset, he just like genuinely wants to know. And the kid says something like, your girlfriend stabbed me with these scissors, and Sam says, she's my wife now. And just the line delivery of that was really funny to me. And then after that, their marriage doesn't matter anything. Like they themselves like know that they're like quote unquote married in a sense, but you know, they're not like actually married. But yeah, that's how the scenes with Cousin Ben pretty much. He's literally just there to like help them out for a bit and get them married, and that's kind of about it. What else? Hold on, I need to look at the posters. Is there someone I'm forgetting? I don't think so. I want to talk about Susie and Sam then, because this is already like half an hour. This isn't a movie where I feel like I want to talk about every single little scene that happens, but I might a little bit. But Sam and Susie are like the main focus of this movie. Like I said, they run away 2 times, but the first time's kind of the part where it's more interesting, where they go on this little adventure. I like when they have downtime, when they're not like walking around the woods and stuff. Where they'll like set up camp. They end up catching some fish. Susie throughout the movie will read to Sam or to the scouts, and I thought that was kind of nice. She'll just sit there and she'll read out loud. I like the way she describes the books she reads, because she takes a couple of them in a suitcase, which is interesting, the things she brings with her. They end up doing a whole inventory scene, which I feel like happens sometimes in these Wes Anderson movies, where she brings a record player, her three of her books, but they're library books, and she doesn't care about them being overdue. And they're the only things in her suitcase, by the way, is just those three books, and some batteries and some other stuff. Because she has this like big yellow suitcase she's lugging around, and I feel like the things she brings is kind of a reminder of like these really are just kids that are running away from home, because that sounds like a kid thing to do, where you would bring like your favorite things rather than like Sam has all of these like survival kits and stuff, but that is also because he doesn't really have things of his own, and he's a scout, and he also took the things he had with him, you know, for like he's focused on all the survival stuff. He's got that covered. Susie's got all the fun things. So yeah, she reads to him sometimes. I thought it was kind of interesting towards the end when they finally, their location, and it's, I think one of the more memorable parts of the movie is they get to this little cove. It's like this little beach. It's like a very kind of private place, and there's the water, and they end up setting up camp there, and they go swimming, and then they're in their like underclothes or whatever, and they end up dancing to this French song that Susie has on their record player. And then they get like a little bit handsy, not anything like graphic or whatever. I just thought it was interesting, because they're like, they end up kissing, they end up sort of touching each other a little bit. But it's in this, I mean, besides the fact that they're 12 and they have hormones and stuff, but it's in this like very innocent way where they're more just like curious about each other in that aspect, not anything like too sexual or whatever. And I thought that was an interesting way to handle it, because I feel like a lot of the times in movies when you see like teens and stuff, I mean, they're 12, but you know, where they, you know, they're like having sex and whatever, you know, where they're like very like horny or something. But here, and again, I know they're like younger, they're like tweens, but that they're just more curious about each other like physically than anything else, you know. I feel like you don't really see that a lot. What else? Especially because like how the parents treat it, because they end up dancing. Susie ends up getting her ears pierced through these little fishing hook things, and I thought, oh man, ouch. And that's probably also not sanitary, because Sam makes her some earrings, and then they go and they sleep in this tent, and they're still in their underclothes, and then that's where everyone finds them. It's actually kind of funny, where it's like they're wrapped up in these blankets, and then they open the tent, and then all of the adults that have been looking for them are just there, but like the way it's shot is kind of funny, how it's going from like shot to shot. And the adults are pissed seeing them like that, of course, and the mom goes to like drag Susie away from Sam and hands her dress and stuff. But I just find that an interesting contrast where, you know, the kids, like I said, are like very innocent about it, and whatever, they're like sleeping in their underclothes, it's fine, and the adults probably think whatever was going on there, like even some of the Kid Scouts assume they like, oh, they got to third base or whatever, you know, everyone sees it in like a sexual way or whatever. But I understand with the parents, because like if you had a teenage daughter or whatever, like a young daughter, and then you see her like wearing almost nothing and just with this boy, you'd probably assume, and the mom had knew they liked each other and stuff, because she describes it as like they wrote these letters and said they were very intimate, probably not intimate as in like a romantic way, but just that they had viewed themselves as like close friends and such. Like they're not like romantic when they first see each other in the field or anything. They're just like two friends hanging out, and then eventually they admit their feelings and then decide to get not legally married and stuff. And then it gets to a point where they like, it kind of turns into almost like a Romeo and Juliet situation where they're trying to escape, not that they're planning to die to like be together, well, sort of, but it's more of like they're willing to run to the ends of the earth as long as they're not separated, because they run away twice. They eventually end up in this church, and then they end up almost jumping off the church roof into some water where they speculate they might actually die or break their necks or something, and they're like about to do it, and the policeman character stops them, and then Sam's adopted and they end up getting to hang out and stuff, which is nice. I don't know if Susie's parents know, probably not at that point, so it works out at the end. But man, the lengths these two like go to each other. And it's kind of interesting to watch this as an adult now, because last time I saw this, I think I was like in my teens, where I feel like if you're younger the first time you watch this, you're like rooting for these kids to see like how far they get, and you don't want the adults to catch them. But then like once you're older, it's just like, what the hell are these 12-year-olds doing? They need to be like caught and stuff, especially because the environment gets like worse and worse, like weather-wise and everything, the further they go along. And like people do get hurt along the way. Like Susie ends up stabbing this kid with scissors, and then Sam ends up poking those injuries later, and it's described as the kid will just have like kidney damage or something. And, you know, they easily could have gotten hurt along the way when they're, like, hiking out in these, on this island. I feel like if Sam wasn't a scout and was such a good scout, they probably would have gotten injured along the way if he didn't have, like, the proper tools and stuff and was taking the care. Like, I feel like if it was just Susie or something, yeah, she probably would have gotten, like, hurt along the way. No, at least she's a good swimmer. That's something Sam mentions about not being a good swimmer, but they have like life jackets, so there's stuff like that. And then the second time they try to leave, there's like a storm that's approaching, and they end up really lucky in that they almost get away, where they're in this little boat, and then they come back to the island, part of the island they're at, because Susie forgot her binoculars, and then the characters just end up on land at that point, and they don't go in the water again, because like 5 minutes later there's like this flood that ends up happening, so they probably could have gotten lost at sea, or who knows what the hell would have happened to them if they had continued to stay on the sailboat. And then at the end of the movie they end up on this roof. It's the roof of a church. It's like already this crazy freaking storm happening, besides the fact they're already planning to jump off the roof into the flooding water below. It's also that, you know, the fact that they're on this roof at all, and it's raining and it's super dangerous and stuff, because they're just that determined to get away from the adults. It's just things like that where you're just like, damn, there's like times you could just like die out here, you know. But they're not really thinking about that, because like I said, they're smart, but like they're impulsive in the way of like they'll just do things if they feel like they need to be done. Yeah, I'm trying to like go back through the scenes in my head and think of if there's anything else. I like that the scoutmaster at least sort of ends up okay at the end, where he's back to like running the scouts, and I think it's hinted at that he starts a relationship. There's this woman that is on this like not telegram, but what is it called from like the 60s and stuff, where they have that big box and it connects people together through like the radio and stuff. It's like a specific job, but there's this woman who does that, that meets the scoutmaster throughout the movie. They don't really talk that much, but then at the end of the movie he keeps a photo of her on his desk, which I feel like implies that they're like at least friends now or something. There's just little details like that where it's kind of a show but don't tell, that I really like in Wes Anderson movies that I think are cool. I mean, I feel like with some of the later ones, sometimes just too many details in like one shot, where it's like it is kind of fun in the sense you like discover new things every time, but it's also kind of like, it can be a little overwhelming. I really like the environment of this movie as well, just wherever the heck this island is. I think it makes an interesting setting, because I feel like most of his movies are like if I'm trying to remember off the no, I was going to say most of them are in cities, but it's not true. Like there's one that takes place at like a marine institute, there's one that's just in France, there's another where it's takes place on like a train to India or a school. There's like a lot of different locations. I like the ones that are like natural environments though, like this one, you know, it's very outdoorsy, you know, also because these kids are on the run. Or like Fantastic Mr. Fox, I think pretty much mostly takes place in like fall, if I remember right, and the characters are animals, so outdoors is the big thing. And just I feel like these movies just kind of hit different with like a outdoors setting and such. I feel like there's more details I could say, about like specifically the characters and stuff, but I can't think of it right now. And you know what? That's okay. I don't need to go into like every single detail about every single little character. I do like fashion wise and stuff. I think Susie was my favorite. She wears these like pink Peter Pan collar dresses. She's always just wearing pink until the end of the movie, where she's ending wearing yellow. I don't know if that's symbolic of anything, because I know that can be a thing in movies where characters, if they start wearing like a different color, it like might mean something about them. I just think her whole look is very cool. She has this like dark blue eyeshadow and stuff. I notice a lot of characters when like things that are supposed to take place in the 60s or were actually made in the 60s for like female characters, a lot of the time will wear like specifically just really bright like blue eyeshadow, and it makes me wonder if that was like an actual fashion trend, because whenever I see that in the movie I'm like, okay, this has to take place specifically in the 60s. I just know, because I see it so much. She wears these dresses, she carries around the suitcase. I like the eyeshadow. She feels more like mature in a way to Sam, but they're at the same like intelligence level and everything. They have some really interesting conversations too, like Susie talking about how she likes fantasy books. And she says something of like, I like the ones with girl characters, but not always. I think for her, it's supposed to be like a form of escapism. She kind of hates her life. There's a part where she's talking to Sam and says that he asks her like if she's depressed, and he asks her why. And she pulls out this book from her bag that she found in her parents' room that says something of like help for the troubled child or whatever. So she knows her parents just kind of view her as like a liability. What else? There's a specific thing I'm thinking of. Or I think just the fact that when she's doing the animal play at the beginning, and they probably can't I don't think they can choose their costumes or anything. And eventually her costume gets changed, but it's this room where Sam ends up wandering in, where it's all these girls and Susie that are dressed as birds. They haven't gone out to the play yet, and all the other girls are dressed as like blue jays and pigeons and doves and sparrows and whatever, and Susie specifically is dressed, I think, as a raven or a crow or something. And I feel like that's kind of a good way to describe her character, where I feel like that would be a bird that fits her, where she just doesn't really fit in with everyone else. She, gets into fights with kids at school and stabs one of the scouts and stuff, but she can be kind of a soft but also like moody person, where she's very like pleasant around Sam and the way they talk and stuff, even before they like decide to become lovers and everything. And I feel like for her, Sam's probably the only person she can be very open to about like her fantasy books. And when she's talking about those, she mentions about he asks her like, oh, those are overdue, and what are you going to do about that? And she says something of like, I think I let them be overdue because I like to have a secret. At one point, it's kind of funny, she mentions of like, oh, I'd love to be an orphan. All my favorite main characters are orphans, and Sam says in the line delivery, but it's also funny, I love you, but you don't know what you're talking about, because he's an orphan, and he doesn't like being an orphan. I don't think anyone would probably like being an orphan, you don't have parents or anything. Where Susie just kind of wants like a form of escapism, and that's kind of what her adventure with Sam brings her, but also like a companion that she can finally just be herself around and talk to. And I feel like I relate to that in some way. I have a hard time kind of opening up to people, but also, and I think it applies to anyone really, of like really feeling comfortable to like be yourself and your interests and whatever. around people you feel comfortable talking to and such. And I'm still not that way, even with about some things, even with some of my closest friends. Or just those kind of conversations I mentioned that are like lines Susie says, I feel like are the sort of things you would really just tell someone only really if you feel comfortable with them and such. But yeah, there's so many cool characters in this. That's part of the reason I really like Wes Anderson's movies. The characters just feel so complex and everything, but a lot of them are just so troubled. But yeah, that's all I'll say for Moonrise. Oh wait, no, one more thing I want to mention. There's parts of the movie where Sam does these watercolor paintings, and you get to see more of them during the credits. I thought those were well done. I thought they were pretty cool. Okay. Yeah, that's it for Moonrise Kingdom. I don't know when I'll watch this again. You know what? I'm glad I waited a little bit to make this review, because I was gonna make it. I ate some dinner. I had some wine with dinner, and I don't like to record when I drink alcohol, so I went to go play some Just Dance for a while, and waited until like my head was, I was able to like formulate my thoughts better and stuff. And I'm glad that kind of forced me to wait it out a bit, because at first I remember finishing the movie and I thought, oh, I didn't like this as much as the last time, but now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, no, I think I do. I don't know if it's still my favorite. I just really like this one. I know for a long time it was, for me, Moonrise Kingdom was my favorite, and then Grand Budapest Hotel, and then Royal Tenenbaums. I don't know if that order will still be true. I haven't watched a lot of these like older ones, like mid 2000s ones, since like I was probably a teenager, so it's definitely been enough time has passed where we'll see if I form new opinions or not. I don't know which of those will be next, or if I'll watch It's Mad 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 World. I'll try to keep these Wes Anderson reviews, because there might be even more that I watch. My dad wants to rewatch Rushmore. I thought about giving the Darjeeling Limited another shot, because that was actually my least favorite Wes Anderson movie. I found it kind of boring from what I remember. I'll try to keep those within, maybe not all posted on the same day, but maybe like day after day, like kind of just keep them together. I think it would be more interesting to watch if you have these like back to back and stuff before. I'll still record and watch other movies. I have to go record a review for St. Trillions right now, because I also watched that today, but I think that'll just be easier. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Moonrise Kingdom so far. I don't know if I give it another watch, if my opinion changes or whatever. The reviews can always change. These are just kind of like my thoughts at the time I end up watching them, whether it's like my first or my, this is probably like my third or fourth now, probably fourth. All right, bye bye.